I'm Nathan and welcome to Stories with a Twang. Today's episode is the fifth and final part of I Found a Red VHS Tape in My Grandma's Collection. What I Saw Still Terrifies Me by C.F. Ortiz. So like I said, this is the fifth and final part, so if you have yet to listen to any of the previous parts of the series, go back and do so and I'll be here waiting for you when you get back. The drive was a long one down the coastal highway. Jagged snowy peaks peered over the vast expanse of green vegetation on black rock. The tall pine trees of the forest near our hometown grew sparser and sparser until they were completely gone. As the salty waves battered the rocky cliffs near us, Thomas, Grandpa, and I discussed the situation. Grandpa explained to us that the hunter wanted to face off at the site of the explosion that had started it all. It was a pair of warehouses on a lot near the coast. The plot of land the warehouses were built on was hidden below the cliffs the long highway expanded over. It was built there to be hidden in plain sight. Most wouldn't see it. It would be tucked beneath the rocky cliffs as they drove by. Those that did see it wouldn't think anything of it. That is where the Russians had met Grandpa to store and sell the cargo to cross through the Bering Sea. We had almost missed the warehouses, but Grandpa never forgot the scenery. Although there was little to work with, he knew. We stood on the cliff overlooking the remains of the charred and abandoned warehouse. Next to it was a still intact, but no less abandoned copy. As I stared down at it, I wondered if the hunter was inside, if he was waiting for us to enter, or if he waited somewhere on the outskirts. He had no woods to hide in this time. The black pickup truck was alone in the gravel parking lot. Bullet holes marked the metal body, metals from the firefight the night before. Or was it earlier this morning? I couldn't be sure. As we looked down over the lot and over the chilly sea, Thomas asked the most obvious question, the one that was on all of our minds. What if he just blows it up? What if he just wants revenge for last time? My grandfather sat in his chair overlooking the warehouse.
He probably wants to. He means to take my family from me before finishing the job. That's why he shot your grandmother. He could have easily taken me, but instead he turned the gun on the love of my life and tried to snuff her out.
His rough and wrinkled fingers dug into the arms of his chair, a subtle sign of rage in his otherwise stoic demeanor.
That's why we can't have the two of you following me in. Not only is it stupid, it's probably exactly what he wants.
Thomas and I argued, but Cartwright took Grandpa's side. He said it would be foolish for anyone to go in when we could wait him out.
We don't take unnecessary risks,
Cartwright said.
He'll have to come out eventually. We surround the warehouse and wait.
We can't. That warehouse is still full of canned food and other non-perishables,
my grandfather explained.
It's probably been his base of operations.
With this new information, we decided to set up defensive positions. Hinton and Serrano remained on the cliff, one covering the back and one covering the front. They would have bird's eye views to overlook the lot. Grandpa showed Cartwright a way down with the van. He took us with, but we remained in the van, ready to make an escape if necessary. That's what we told them at least. Are we just gonna watch? Thomas asked me as our grandfather wheeled himself ever closer to the metal-encased pole barn. Cartwright followed behind. We told Grandpa we would stay out of harm's reach. As my grandfather looked over his shoulder at us in the distance, then disappeared into the warehouse, I said, "Doesn't mean we will, though." I grabbed my gun and Thomas did the same. As the doors to the van closed, I told him we would look for an entrance in the back and cut the man in the mask off if necessary. With a light jog, we scampered across the lot to the metal wall of the warehouse. We justified with each other that it made no sense to not use every person available. The two troopers had sight, but what if they missed? "You think it's unlocked?" I whispered to Thomas while gesturing to a set of graded steps that led up to a door on the back of the metal shed. He was staring at the charred skeleton of the twin warehouse that was destroyed so many years ago. "Only one way to find out," he said. Up the steps into the red-painted door we snuck. As we moved, we heard the faint sound of the overhead door of my grandfather had gone into closing with considerable squeaking from its age. I asked what Thomas could see through the small square window in the center of the heavy metal door. He told me it was nothing but darkness. Tentatively, he tried the handle and slowly it turned. The inside of the building was dark with only faint rays of light coming from cracks in the roof, doors, or walls. The singular room of the warehouse was filled with rows of metal shelving holding pallets of canned goods and several appliances. The catwalk our door led into circled the whole warehouse, a perfect inner vantage point. "Why did he pick a spot so easy for us to get an advantage in?" I asked. "He seems to care more about the story of it all," Thomas replied. "If he just wanted us dead with no fuss, we wouldn't have made it past elementary school." We stepped in carefully and quietly. Although we wanted to remain up top to keep a strong position against the hunter, we could see very little. From some location in the echoing warehouse, we could hear a conversation between two men speaking in Russian. Well, he's not dead yet, I thought. For a moment, we only listened to the distant conversation before I told Thomas through the quietest whisper I could manage that I wanted to get closer in case he needed help. He argued with me immediately. He said we were close as we needed to be without risking being seen. I heeded his advice only momentarily before I began to descend down the steps. "I'm not following you," he said quietly. "Good, look for a better vantage point." Through dusty, mildewed rows of crates and pallets I snuck, slowly and thoughtfully so that my steps would not give me away. I crept closer to the sound of conversation. I wondered why I could not hear the voice of the old trooper when I felt a pair of hands grasp me and cover my mouth. "You're not sticking to the plan," Cartwright whispered furiously. He slowly let go of me and non-verbally directed my attention to something. I saw the jumbled mess of homemade explosives on one of the steel supports of the building. "How many?" I mouthed more than spoke. He held up 7 fingers and gestured to 7 different spots. "Can we disarm them?" Cartwright did not answer immediately. Then he asked me if it was worth the risk. I shrugged and whispered back, "It's either get blown up now or get blown up later. We could try and get close to him, take him out with a headshot. And if he hears us coming and decides to self-destruct, let's take our chances with the bombs first. Tom is on the catwalk, maybe he'll find a shot, but if not, our best bet is getting these things out of commission." Cartwright nodded, though he didn't look entirely pleased. I understood the hesitation. I wasn't entirely on board with the plan either, but it at least was a plan and not a Hail Mary. Then, as I approached the mess of explosives and wires, pocket knife out and ready, I wondered if this wasn't also just a different form of Hail Mary. I'm not very religious, but I can say without shame that I prayed before I cut the wire. Slowly, the blade dug into the rubber. Slowly, I pushed deeper, waiting for the inevitable end of my life. As my blade cut completely through, my heart stopped momentarily. But when no explosion came, I relaxed. "Now just to do it 6 more times," I whispered. Cartwright took his own pocket knife out and went around disarming others. Just after I had cut through my second wire, I heard the conversation between my grandfather and the hunter get louder and angrier. Then I heard a commotion and a thud. My grandfather yelled,
"Do it then, you son of a bitch!"
Without thinking, I immediately moved toward the noise with my gun drawn. I got to a part of the warehouse where the shelves stopped and saw my grandfather sprawled on the dirty concrete floor. He looked up at me in shock.
"No, you were supposed to be here."
Then the loud crack of a gun went off. Thomas, from his position on the catwalk, had fired at the hunter who stood just behind me. I stared at the man in his mask. He held his arm as blood spilled from it. I knew he wasn't invincible. This confirmed it. My childhood fears fell away as I swung the butt of my rifle at his head and knocked him backwards. Onto the ground he fell and I aimed my rifle at him. Just briefly I heard him laugh. Then the whole warehouse collapsed. Sheet metal and supports collapsed down on us. Shelves and their contents spilled under the weight. I heard nothing but a noise so loud it deafened me. I coughed up dust, now pinned to the ground. I reconnected to reality with nothing but ringing in my ears and a sharp pain in my leg. As the ringing faded and more of the world became clearer, I heard several competing shouts. I heard my grandfather crying and begging for us to be okay. I heard Thomas far off in the distance calling out to us. Then, as I saw the large frame of the hunter making his way through the rubble toward me, I heard the bellow of Officer Cartwright tackling him to the ground. My grandfather called my name and I saw him dragging himself toward us.
Can you get up?
He asked as Cartwright and the hunter wrestled. My leg, I stammered. My leg is pinned. He pushed aside shattered planks of wood and lifted sheets of metal to get closer. He embraced me for a moment and I felt the tears from his eyes wash the dust from my cheeks. He told me he would get me free. Then he found a metal rod and pried the support beam which pinned me up just enough for me to slide it out. I won't be able to walk, I said.
Then crawl out. Get out of here.
Not without taking down that fucker. He's played his trick. Now he's vulnerable. We all survived. Then I heard another distinctive blast that could only be a gunshot. I pulled myself up onto a split crate of VHS tapes to see through the floating dust and rays of sunlight through the collapsed roof. I saw Cartwright's body on the ground. He had been shot in the upper chest, or was it the neck? He held his right collar tightly and could not speak. Blood spilled through his fingers. Then the hunter turned to see me. Only then did I realize I had no gun. It had been lost in the explosion. The hunter lifted his own pistol and aimed it at me. I looked down the black barrel of the gun that would take my life, but the shot missed. It missed because at the last second the hunter was thrown off by an old man biting down hard onto his leg. My grandfather had saved my life. The hunter did not appreciate it. He kicked my grandfather hard in the face, surely breaking his nose. Then he turned his attention back to me. He threw his gun aside as he approached me. As I watched the haunting image of the figure masked behind a wooden facade, my entire body wanted to freeze. I knew I couldn't. I pulled my pocket knife out, now my only weapon. As if to challenge me, the man in the wooden mask pulled out a blade the size of my forearm. Ducking under beams and crawling over boxes, he moved toward me. His sinister eyes never moved from mine. Then I felt his massive hand grab onto my throat. He began to choke me, to see the life drain from my face. I slashed at his torso, but my minuscule blade couldn't even puncture his coat. Black spots filled my vision. I became lightheaded and only barely heard laughing. Laughing cut short by the sudden sound of chains, and then his grip loosened and then fully fell off my throat. I grasped for air and saw my grandfather. For the first time in a long time, I saw him standing completely upright and from his own volition. I saw the pain in his eyes as he wrestled the life from the hunter. I saw a rusty chain just below the wooden mask. It caught the gray yarn beard in its links. The man in the wooden mask stabbed my grandfather repeatedly in the side, trying desperately to loosen his grip. But as they both fell to the ground, my grandfather refused to let his hold go. The man in the wooden mask stared at me through the holes in the carved baggy eyes. For the first time, I saw fear in the opposite direction. As I pulled my body through the debris, I realized that neither of them would survive. My grandfather could not last the many stab wounds to his body. The hunter violently fought until at last the swinging blade slowed in tempo and the knife fell to the ground. His last words were nothing more than gargled gasps for air, so similar to what I had heard on the film as a child. Finally, I pulled myself over the crate of tapes, plastic breaking underneath me to get to the two. Thomas called in the background. I heard him ripping metal and debris away, desperately looking for a path in. Together, we threw the hunter's lifeless corpse aside. My grandfather was still alive, but not for long. Thomas grabbed onto me. We both held tightly onto one of the old man's hands. He did not break his gaze from us. "I forgive you," I said. "It wasn't your fault. The faintest smile grew on his lips. He mouthed a final goodbye to us. Then he was gone. Cartwright and my grandmother attended the funeral. Both of them had pulled through, but only just. The 2 officers and Thomas helped Cartwright and then me to the cars when we drove at ludicrous speeds back to town. We had to leave the 2 bodies there, the hunter and my grandfather's. I refused to go with them until they came back. I stayed in the rubble of the warehouse for a long time just staring at the bodies. Eventually, I pulled the mask away from the man who had haunted me my whole life. The man who had taken my grandfather from me. He looked like anyone else. No defining features. Completely ordinary. The image of his face remained with me throughout the next couple of days. Thomas and Isabel worked with Grandma to organize the funeral. They called up distant family to visit. I was no help. I spent all my time staring off into the woods of Grandma's yard. I sat in a wheelchair due to my broken leg. I didn't need it, but I asked for it. The day of the funeral, I arrived to the small graveyard in the forest before all of the other guests, all save for one. As I rolled my chair down the main path, I saw Cartwright in the distance. He looked at me as I made my way up to him. He stood in front of the graves of a husband and wife. He explained that he just wanted to let them know that he finally got the guy. Grandma acted stoic throughout the event, but I knew she was broken inside. I could tell because I was too. After the funeral, her and I remained longer than anyone else. We talked for a while, but we were silent for longer. Eventually, as dusk fell on the cemetery, she placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "I'm going to drive back home. I'm going to make some supper. You are going to have your time alone, and then you'll come eat with your family." She kissed me on the forehead and was gone. I didn't say anything even as the sunlight fully slipped away. I simply pulled out the wooden mask from my bag and placed it beside Grandpa's headstone. I rolled my chair away, leaving the wooden masquerade as one final gift to my grandfather. I don't know if I actually forgive him or not. I wanted him to die at peace. I wanted him to have some closure. Maybe one day I'll have the same. All I know now is that I have to continue living, to try and earn the life we had fought so hard to preserve. And though I may have some very rough years ahead of me, I try to look at the positive. Whatever the circumstances were, this man raised me. He made me into what I am. He looked after me. I may not have a good adult life, but I had a good childhood, and nothing can take that away from me. Alright everyone, I hope you all really enjoyed this story. I would like to give a giant thank you to CF Ortiz for letting me read this series on the show. If you would like me to do more series like this, please let me know on social media or by emailing storieswithatwang@gmail.com. If you have any stories you would like me to read on the show, you can send them over to storieswithatwang@gmail.com. The show is on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube at Stories with a Twang Podcast. It would mean an awful lot if you could rate and review the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to share with your friends and family as well. It could really help the show grow. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and until next time, remember that a little twang goes a long way.